Mack.
And I'm Lisa Norton.
And together we're Material Girlfriends.
So today we thought we'd give you a very quick tutorial on how to do paper piecing.
So we have this fun little block, the I Love Us, for February. Lisa has her pieces prepared and we're going to get right to it.
Sounds good. First thing you're going to want to do is to make copies of your pattern for the I Love Us in February quilt block. I like to use Carol Doak's papers. It's not necessary. You can use copy paper, but what makes it so convenient is that the newsprint tears apart from the stitches so much easier. So you've got two pieces for this block. You've got the top half, just like that, and then the bottom half. So what I like to do first is I'm going to trace the lines on the back sides of my paper piece patterns. So you don't need to get a ruler out. It's just sloppy. You're not going to be sewing on these lines. These lines are just to help you for positioning. So once I have my lines drawn, I compare to the picture so I know what's going to be pink and what is background. So I decided I would make my heart pink because we're just going to focus on this part here today. The little pinwheels will be in a different video. But the numbers that are going to be pink would be the 1, 4, 6, and the 7, 8, 9. So on this piece of paper, you'll see that it's listed with paper pieces, and you'll find the correct numbers so that you know what size strip to cut. Now, if you're going to just use one background, you can just cut one 3-inch strip, and then just use that one long strip to piece all your background pieces. Well, I wanted to do mine scrappy. So basically I cut my backgrounds 3 inches wide and then arranged it so I had all of my pinks cut for my heart. So how I like to do it, once I cut all my pieces, I find my template and then I'm going to lay them in numeric order. So I started with number 14. I laid it down first. Here, let me scooch this over just a little bit. And then I laid down 13, 12, and then I had 10 and 11, 4, and then we went to 9, 8, and 7. So these pieces are all laid out and cut according to the size of the pattern, and they're ready to go. So I'm going to set it aside. This one I'm going to do the same thing. I lay out my pieces first, 6, then I have 5, and then 4, and then I have 3, 2, and then the first piece, number 1. So now this piece is ready to go. So when I am sewing on pieces that are on a big sheet like this, I like to just cut it out so that there's less paper to deal with. Now this is a 2-part pattern, so we're going to complete each half separately, and then when the pieces are done, we just sew those 2 pieces together. All right, I just trimmed out my paper. I left plenty of space on the outside edge. This outside line is our trim line, so we don't want to really cut our piece of paper to that trim line since we're going to be sewing our fabric all the way to that trim line. And now it's ready to go. Prepare your sewing machine. You're going to want to put on your open toe foot. That's that U-shaped one. The reason you want to use that one is because we're just going to be following a line, and you'll be able to see your line much easier than if you had your 1/4-inch foot on. Next, change your stitch length to 1.8. The reason you want a tighter stitch, it makes it easier to tear off your paper. We're ready to get started. So since we had laid our fabrics out, just in case, I'm going to pick up my piece number 1 and I'm going to lay it in position. Now, the first piece you're always going to have right side up. The second piece you're going to be right side down. So when you lay your first piece down, you want to be sure that you are well covered. I'm a little bit tight on that end, so let me push it up a little. Okay, I'm a 1/4 inch beyond all the lines, so I'm going to stick a little pin in there. The next is we're going to add piece number 2. Now, when we add piece number 2, you can't see where that line is, and guessing is kind of tough. So what we're going to do is we're going to pre-cut piece number 1 before we add piece number 2. So I'm just going to flip it over. I'm going to find the line between 1 and 2, and you're just going to lay a postcard on it. Fold it back on that postcard. I like the add a quarter rulers. There's a little lip on it, and that catches that postcard quite nicely. You can use a regular ruler as well. You're just going to measure 1/4 of an inch from your postcard. I'm going to throw that piece away. Now we just pre-cut that seam. Why did I need to move that? Might slide that down just a hint. Be sure it gets that line. Now we're ready to position our second piece. So we're going to lay right sides together, and then I always audition it. So as we sew that seam, I'm going to pretend that seam is there, and I audition my piece to make sure it covers 1/4 of an inch everywhere. That looks good. So now I'm ready to sew. So I'm just going to carefully flip it over, find that line, and we're going to sew right on the line between 1 and 2. Now, if you have a stay stitch on your sewing machine, go ahead and select that feature, because having that extra little stay stitch is nice and convenient. Helps your seam not to come undone when you're removing the paper. That looks great. Now we're ready to add piece number 3. So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to flip it over. I'm going to make sure my pieces are flat. Find the line between 1 and 3. You're going to lay your postcard down, fold that piece back, use your add a 1/4 inch ruler, and you're going to pre-cut your 1/4 inch seam. You're going to get your piece number 3 fabric. Now, I could have had this piece a little bit bigger, but it was so darn cute, and it was all I had left. So it's just going to make it, but you know what they say, bigger is better. I'm going to flip that over, and we're going to sew just on the line. Press this one open. That's looking good. So now we're ready for piece number 4. Piece number 4 is this big piece. So what we're going to do is we're going to lay the card, am I upside down? Back just like that. Use our add a 1/4 inch ruler. And we're just going to pre-cut that 1/4 inch allowance. And now we're ready to add piece number 4. Right sides together. Always audition it to make sure it's going to cover where you think it should. Make sure that cover's okay. That's looking good. So I'll sew this piece on. Make sure it's nice and flat. If you're concerned some of your pieces might shift, you sure can add a pin. See, it did shift just a tiny bit. That's looking good. Now we're ready to add piece number 5. So same thing, we're going to get our postcard, put it on that line, fold it back, and then pre-cut our seam allowance. And we're going to use piece number 5. Lay that on the edges, and then you're going to fold that over and make sure it all works.
we'll sew that piece. Now we're ready to add our last piece for this unit, which is piece number 6. Flip it over so it's a little easier. Use your postcard, fold that over. Use your add a 1/4 inch ruler. They do make longer rulers, but most of the time I sew with small pieces, so when I need a longer ruler, I usually just slide my ruler down. Oops, I missed that piece, but that'll be fine. I'll just trim it off. And then we're going to add that on. We'll fold it over, make sure it covers everything we want it to. There you have it. Okay, so we're going to give this one a good pressing, and then we're going to trim it on this outside line. There we go. There you go. That half is ready. So now we're just going to do template 2 or B. Can't call. Ready to do our second half. We're continuing with the numbers, so we're going to start with piece number 7. First piece is always right side up, and that looks like it's going to cover quite nicely. Now I'm going to pin it just to hold it in place. We'll flip it over. I'm going to find the line between 7 and 8. You're going to put your postcard down on that line, fold it over, and use your 1/4 inch ruler, or your add a 1/4 inch ruler. To pre-cut your seam allowance edge. And we're going to add piece number 8. This will be right sides together. And then you're going to flip it over to addition to be sure that it's going to cover everything quite nicely, and it will. If you want, this piece is big. I'm going to go ahead and stick another pin in it to help it from shifting. We're going to sew on that line between 7 and 8. Little finger press. We're ready to do piece number 9, so we're going to flip it over. Postcard on that line between 8 and 9. Fold it back. right sides together. And of course, audition it, make sure it covers everything. That's kind of tight down there. We need to move it down. Let's move it down just a bit. That's much better. The piece is big, so a pin is fine to add. Helps it to keep from shifting. And we're going to sew on the line between 8 and 9. All right, there we've sewn all of our pieces. Now when we trim this one, there's a little bit of knowledge you need to know. This outside edge, the block is supposed to be 8.5 inches. Now when you copy this onto paper, you're not quite certain that your 1/4 inch on both sides is actually accurate. So what I would recommend is trim your top and your bottom, but then get your 8.5 inch square to trim out your sides to make sure that you are cutting it at 8.5 inches wide. Okay, I'm going to cut my first line at the top. And I'm going to cut my second line at the bottom. And for the left and right sides, I'm going to make sure my 1/4 inch seam or my 1/4 inch line is on that 1/4 inch. So when I trim it, I'm not just trusting the paper to be 1/4 inch wide. I'm going to trust that my line is accurate. And then this, of course, since I'm using an 8.5 inch wide ruler, should be nice and square. There we go. So look how pretty that's going to be. Now you have two choices. You can go ahead and line those two pieces and then do your 1/4 inch seam, or you can tear the paper away and then sew your two units together. Different people like it either way. It doesn't seem to matter. Just check your accuracy, see which system works best for you, and then stick to it. So when I am pulling the paper away, I just rip right to the line and then pull it apart. I don't like to tear the paper from the edge. That'll weaken your stitches. So tear to the middle and then from the middle to the out. Personally, I find that I am more accurate if I tear my paper away and then do my 1/4" seam rather than sewing through 2 pieces of paper. All right, I changed my sewing machine back. I put my J-foot on, reset it to my 1/4" seam. My stitch length is now at 2, and I'm ready to sew it. I could have pinned this. There you have it. Just needs pressing. We'll put on our pinwheels and then your block will be finished. Thank you for joining me today. Leave a comment, like, and subscribe.